You're watching Taking Stock. We're talking to Ina Paarman, who has been a legend of South African kitchens for decades. They say Helen of Troy had a face that launched 1,000 ships. Well, this is the product that launched nearly 1,000 others. Not 1,000, I don't think, but over 100 products that adorned shelves over the last 30 years have their origins in this recipe, which is your grandmother's.
Yes, it was... Of course, you know what it's like when one is a child. You look at your grandmother and you think, oh my God, I don't want to be like that, so old-fashioned. And it's only years later that I realized how fortunate I was to taste real South African cooking when I was a child. So now, when some of the chefs come with weird and wonderful concoctions, that is not remotely related to those beautiful slow roasts, that people don't understand, that unless you've cooked on a cold stove and you understand that you move a pot from a high heat to a low heat, and that temperature control is one of the cornerstones of good cooking. They switch on a gas flame or an electric hot plate, and they boil everything to death. It's about the gentle manipulation and also the gentle method of seasoning things. You don't just chuck in a bit of salt right at the end. You need to season at every stage. You need to taste. I often come across people who tell me, oh, I never taste. Now, it's like understanding music and not listening.
Yeah.
You have to taste, and you have to have respect for ingredients.
That respect for ingredients and that level of integrity, and you've got an enormous cupboard just behind us and your test kitchen behind here, where you still work with the alchemy and the science and the art of the blending. Do you try new things every day? Do you sometimes go, let's see what happens if we add oil and water and see whether or not the rules of science have changed?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I've been cooking for too long. My God, it's day and night. And also, the thing that makes it quite unique in our household is my son, of course, grew up on experimental cooking. He learned to taste, I think, before birth. And he now has a very refined palate. So we never sit down to a meal without somebody saying, oh, perhaps a bit more of this, and wouldn't it have been better to do that? And every meal becomes a scientific experiment. It's difficult for me because nobody invites me to dinner. They think I'm going to be critical.
It is. I mean, it's a really difficult thing, isn't it? I mean, you invite the expert in and you then bare your soul, because that's what cooking is about. But you mentioned your son. And your son, Graham, went and studied accounting and decided he didn't want to go and get a job either. So he then forced you to expand the business of Ina Paarman. I mean, if there is a business mind behind the Ina Paarman empire, it's probably as a result of the accountant's son, Graham, forcing your hand. Were you nervous about breaking into the big leagues?
Well, of course, it started small. And it cost a lot of money to keep a business going. But I really think that old saying that in order to have a good business, you need a creative, you need a financial wizard, and you need a son of a bee who can follow up on the creditors. And I think our business is a story of teamwork. You know, I did the creative bit in the beginning all by myself. Graham handled the finances like a champ, and my husband watched the creditors. We never, in the years that he handled the creditors, had a bad debt. I think they were terrified of him.
No, but again, and so many people go into business and don't look at the detail. They don't look at the skill sets that are required. Family businesses muddle through. Some succeed despite themselves. Some fail spectacularly, and families are ruined. You built this thing organically from within the family structure. And you took risk as a family. You put the house up in order to be able to buy equipment and ingredients in the early days of your first factory.
And also to publish a cookbook. I think.
Did you borrow money to publish this book? Because nobody would publish.
Nobody would publish it. But I think there are very few businesses based on a cookbook. But I think this business, it was started by a cookbook and grown by a family. And there are obvious difficulties when, when you're the mother, you tend to expect your children to listen to you. But when your son is a partner with far more knowledge than you, then you have to understand that you must fit into that and that you must concede when it's necessary.
Just down the road in Deep River, you've got a very impressive factory. The steam coming out of pipes everywhere. It employs, 200 people, and you are exporting to about 30 countries all over the world.
Yes.
I mean, the growth curve of this business, take me through it.
I'm very proud, and I don't know if I should boast about it, but I can't help it, that in the last year we've had about 20% growth, which in this depressed economy I think is a masterstroke.
But how do you grow? In a year where we've had a quarter of recession, where unemployment has spiked up to 29%, where business confidence is all but evaporated, where Ramaphoria has gone to Rama uncertainty. How do you keep motivated to grow a business at 20%?
I think that, again, it's people. Our sales force are doing a fantastic job. They make sure that the banker lines are on the shelf. We continuously innovating, and my job now is to make love to the customer. And the customer is not the pick and pay buyer. The customer is the person who picks up the product off the shelf. And one must never forget that. And to build that trust and that confidence with customers take time, because women, and most of our customers are women, we operate word of mouth. Your gynecologist, your hairdresser, all those people.
Your key cooking ingredients.
Yeah. And people often don't admit that they use our products. And I've had so many letters saying, I had this amazing dish, but the hostess wouldn't give the recipe, and I sneaked in the dustbin, and there was one of
Ina Paarman has been helping hosts and hostesses of dinner parties deceive their guests for decades. She's learned a couple of pivotal lessons in building a family business over those decades. The slow food movement is something which has sort of continued around the world. She's part of that. But in a world of instant gratification, in a world of social media, how do you run old school in a new school world? More with Ina Paarman in a moment.